Chromosomes. Little strands of nucleic acids and proteins are the fundamental genetic instructions that tell us who we are at birth. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, but each year in the United States, about 6,000 people are born with an extra chromosome, making them a person with Down syndrome. If you've ever encountered someone with Down syndrome, you know that they are some of the kindest, most joyful people you will ever meet. They truly have something extra. My name is Lisa Nichols, and I have spent the last 24 years as both the CEO of Technology Partners and as the mother to Allie. Allie has something extra in every sense of the word. I have been blessed to be by her side as she impacts everyone she meets. Through these two important roles as CEO and mother to Allie, I have witnessed countless life lessons that have fundamentally changed the way I look at the world. While you may not have an extra chromosome, every leader has something extra that defines who you are. Join me as I explore the something extra in leaders from all walks of life and discover how that difference in each of them has made a difference in their companies, their families, their communities, and in themselves. If you like this episode today, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. I'm delighted to have Chris Marshall on the show today. Chris is the founder and CEO of Verified Backups. Well, Chris Marshall, welcome to the Something Extra podcast. I am so delighted that we were able to make this happen. And I have to say, this was kind of a funny thing. You know, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, and you had asked Jenny, you said, does this ever happen? And Jenny said, only with technical people, which we thought was so funny.
Yeah.
But there was a firewall that was kind of keeping you from being able to utilize our platform. But we are making it work because that's what we do, right, Chris? We're problem solvers.
Absolutely.
Well, I am really delighted to have you here. And you and I connected several years ago, Chris. I think it was probably to about 2015. Mike Jetty, I'll never forget Mike Jetty introducing us to you, Chris. And I remember meeting you. And it's when you had Database Concepts, which you founded, I think 31 years ago. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I remember meeting you and thinking, this has got to be the nicest guy ever. And you know what? You have proved me so right, because you are. You're just a quality human being. And it's been fun to work with you. We've provided some talent for you the last, almost decade here.
Yeah, that's been a great experience. You know, when you need really good people, you know where to turn. And for me, it's always been Technology Partners.
Yeah, we so appreciate that. Well, like I said, we've got a lot to talk about. Cannot wait for our listeners to get to know kind of some of the things that you're doing. But before we get into that, I want to know a little bit more about who you are, Chris Marshall. So if you could take me back to growing up, did you grow up in St. Louis? Tell me a little bit about your background growing up.
Thank you. So I did grow up in St. Louis. I was actually born in New York, and it's kind of an interesting story. My parents had tried several times to have kids, and there were miscarriages and there were stillbirths, and just it was hard. And so they went through the adoption process and adopted me when I was 10 weeks old. It's been a wonderful experience. And after that, they were able to have kids sort of the old-fashioned way. So I'm the oldest of four, and we're all about 2 years from each other. But the great thing is my mom and dad always treated me like one of the gang. We were always the same. And I've always appreciated that. This is your brother, not this is your stepbrother, this is your half brother. And, you know, I just spent last weekend in California with my youngest brother. You know, we are close to this day.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Well, God bless your mom and dad, Chris. I'm so grateful for them. I'm grateful for all people that step out and adopt children. I've always just had a very special place in my heart, for children that need a forever family. So that kind of explains something to me, though, because I know you're good friends with my friend, Marcy Bursack.
Right. Marcy's amazing. and the work she does. And I think people don't understand, or there's a stigma around adopting kids out of the foster care system. But for the right adoptive family, it can be a beautiful experience.
Mhm. Okay, so now I get it. It's all clicking for me now. So thank you for sharing it. So you were the oldest of 4. What did you like to do when you grew up? When you were growing
Uh,
up, what'd you like to do?
I love to read. I love to just take long walks outside. We grew up in University City, here a suburb of St. Louis. And there was a park and there was a river that we could walk along, and life was good. Um,
Yeah.
as I got older, I got into technology and computers, and we had one of the first Apple II computers. Um, and I would sit up late at night trying to figure out code with that. And so that's kind of how things progressed.
And
Um,
that's good. I was going to ask you that. How did you get into it? But before we talk about that, I know you went to WashU and you
mhm.
got a degree in psychology. So what was the precipice for psychology? Because I'm like, why did he do psych? Did he want to just study, the human condition and human behavior? I mean, what was the precipice for that? And then yeah, I was going to ask you about your transition then to tech.
So it's really interesting. My dad encouraged me to go to WashU. He was a professor there and study computer science and electrical engineering double major. So that's intense. And I did that for a short while, but I really enjoyed people. I ran the blood drive for a couple of years. I did a lot of like outward focused, people oriented things that ended up feeling a lot more fun. Uh, and I didn't want to sit in a cubicle and program a computer by myself all day. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where I saw things going. Um, I enjoyed people, and so psychology was a natural, just learning how to understand people and relate to people and all of that. It was also something I could do without extending my 4 years, and that was a blessing. And so I just, I did that. A lot of people don't like what they're doing and don't want to switch or think they can't switch. And it was great to switch directions. So I got out of WashU a long time ago and looked around and realized that if I wanted to take psychology to the next level, that would be grad school. And I had just done college for 4 years and I really didn't want to go back. So I sort of drifted back into technology and technical settings, did consulting for a couple of big companies in St. Louis. And that's how that went because I got married 1990. I had a couple kids, and it's like they want to eat, and I can't do that as a psych major.
Right. Well, I think you picked well. Now, I love psychology too. And I remember because to your point, I love people and I thought this would be really a lot of fun. And I had considered that because I had a psych professor. Sometimes it's a professor too, right, Chris, that really kind of inspires you and kind of that light bulb comes on. And I loved her. And I was like, oh, I think, but kind of to your point, I didn't really want to go on and get my doctorate in psychology. And so I ended up majoring in accounting, kind of for the same reason, thinking, oh, we need to pay the bills and I know I can get a job as an accountant. But I love that. Well, and the thing is, long gone are those days, right, Chris, where a technical person can just sit in a cubicle and not talk to people. That is not
Right.
the way it is anymore, right? You are collaborating with teams. And so having that psychology background, I think, really is probably a good background for any field.
It is. And, your whole life is going to be working with people in one way or another. And what can you do to enhance that and to enhance the other person's experience?
For sure. Well, I know that you've done a lot in like data warehousing and that sort of thing. But like I said, 31 years ago, 1993. So, Chris, you founded Database Concepts 1 year before we founded Technology Partners.
I know
So,
you're just a young company. Um,
exactly.
I had done consulting gigs for a couple of large companies in St. Louis, and it was always like I would go through a company, a temping agency or something, and they had a 6-month assignment. And, when this is over, we'll find you the next one. And that didn't really happen. So through references and some people I knew, I started doing computer work. And in the early days, it was more like networking and installing hardware and computers, but it very quickly got to be database design and programming, which I really, really loved, and hence the name Database Concepts. And that served me very well and served my family well for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and we'll talk about this, but you've been a serial entrepreneur because you're doing something a little different, or you've developed a product, and I want to talk about that. But what do you think, Chris, are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way as an entrepreneur? Because it's not easy. It's certainly not easy.
Um, there's like a certain amount of faith and trust, and this comes from our shared faith background. But you know when you're a W-2 employee, and W-2 employees are wonderful, right? But your paycheck's going to come a week from Friday, and it's going to be $1,500, right? And so you can just gear things around that. And when you're an entrepreneur, two things have to happen. You have to find the work. You have to
Mm-hmm.
do the work. It's three things, and then you have to get paid. And it's an amazing thing. All my customers pay by check, and so it's like, well, what's going to be in the mailbox today? It's sort of like the magical thing to see what came in, but you start stacking up customers and assignments, and I mean, it works out. We have 5 kids. They never missed a meal, and it's been a real blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have to have a little bit of resilience too,
Yeah.
don't you, Chris? Where does resilience come in? Because there are some days where you don't know what's going to be in the mailbox. I mean, and some days you may even be thinking, "Oh, is this really worth it?"
Yeah.
Not every day is unicorns and rainbows as an entrepreneur.
It's not, but I wouldn't change it. And just a quick story. The flexibility is a beautiful thing. So my wife was working in a medical office, and she had to be there every day. But the kids would come to me the night before and say, "Hey, Dad, I've got orthodontist tomorrow. Can you take me at 11?" Kind of right in the middle of the day. And I would just say, "Well, let me see what the boss said." And then I'd turn and say, "Well, the boss just said yes. So I'll take you in the morning." But that's really cheesy. But for my youngest is 27 now, my oldest is 39. For all of those years, the boss always said yes. And that's something they remember.
Hmm. Oh, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. Um, well, okay, so let me ask you this. We're Technology Partners is a little bit different. I mean, we started as a solopreneur. Greg was, we started because we both left corporate America, and he was consulting, and so I pretty much started pro bono for the first probably year and a half until we had enough cash flow coming in. But I remember those early days, though, Chris. We were the shipping department. We were the accounting department. We were the delivery. We were the everything department. I mean, you've been a solopreneur. How did you do that? Did you outsource everything and then just what you were best at, do that? Or how have you managed that over the last 31 years?
It all really depends on the kind of work. I would guess that you and Greg wouldn't trade those early days for anything in the world. And
No.
same here. Most of what I'm delivering with Database Concepts is software design, software developed, installed, documentation, etc. So there's not much of a shipping department. But what I've really found the most beneficial was to outsource some of the really high level projects. So I do projects for a number of wealth advisors nationwide, and that's where I brought in Technology Partners talent. Shameless plug for you guys. But this guy's brilliant. He does phenomenal work. He's way smarter than me. And when he gets a project, it may be a 6-month project, but by gosh, he is on budget. He is on time. and the clients love him, and the clients keep calling back. And so um, those more complex jobs were really rewarding to outsource.
Right. Go find partners, right? With that. So, um, let's talk about inventing something new.
Okay,
Uh, because you developed a patented technology that tests each and every database backup every single day to ensure usability and currency. The company is called Verified Backups. You started this during the pandemic,
I did. It
Chris.
was my pandemic baby.
Yeah, the
So
pandemic baby. So tell us more about that.
yeah, and I want to come from the angle of like the interest story, not just a product plug. But over the years, a couple of my customers had data disasters. One was a lightning strike that fried their server. It was a stock trading company. I had written their software, and they couldn't trade any stocks because it was on a local server. Um, 5 years before that, I had set up a daily encrypted backup that brought their data to my server. They knew about it. It helped the development. I was on the beach in Florida when they got hit. I got a phone call. I restored them to the day before. All they needed to do was get a new computer that didn't smell like smoke, um, because that was non negotiable. And then I had another company that got a virus that wiped out every file on every hard drive. And when they called me in to look, I looked at their backups, and they had a payroll system for 350 people. Um, People's Republic of Illinois, you have to have complete payroll records. And that had not backed up in 9 months. And their IT people didn't know it. The owner of the company didn't know it. And, that could be disastrous. So, fortunately, they had senior managers who came in sort of after hours to manually enter 42,000 payroll records. But you think of a little mom and pop shop, that might not be possible. Um, what I realized is companies don't know if all of their stuff is backed up, especially their databases. So I focus on SQL databases and MySQL. The only way to know if it's backed up is to test it by doing a restore somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
23% of companies never do that. They never test their DR plan. I know you'd like to meet all of them and do work for them. Uh, 50% of the remaining companies test once a year. And, we live in a world where um, the engine on the airplane you fly in is tested every other day. The brakes on your car are tested every time you turn the key on. And we have a situation where we do this once a year. So I invented a product to do something similar to that first company, create a daily um, encrypted backup, uh, copy it to a secure location on Amazon, and then Amazon does a full restore every day. And then I do some date checking to make sure that they don't have old data. And then they get an email, dear Lisa, we have a copy of your payroll, inventory, ERP, whatever. Uh, Today is June 18th, and we see data through June 17th. So I call it a verified backup.
Mm-hmm.
Put that together in 2020, started taking customers on in 21. And one of my advisors said, you ought to see if you can get the IP for that, patented. So that's another story. My brother's a lawyer. I went through somebody in his firm in New York, phenomenal, super smart. And 6 months later, I had a full US patent, which,
That's just incredible.
yeah, which just means that, like, apparently Microsoft didn't think of this or they would have had the patent.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So,
for
yeah,
sure. I'm glad that you beat them to the punch there,
yeah,
Chris.
I'm sure
I
they're worried.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask you. I said no backup. Let's just back up a little bit, but no pun intended.
Yeah,
um,
you can do that all day long.
yeah, I know. So, I was going to ask you, what do you see as the future of protective technologies, and is that verified backups?
Verified backups is going to be a player in that, because nobody I've found in 4 years of research does what I do. Nobody does it every day. Nobody does it on the remote copy. A lot can happen. These are computers, right? We went through a couple of computers just to get one that would work for this podcast. And
That's right.
but the great thing is nothing bad was going to happen if we couldn't find another laptop. But if you can't find a backup, so we're just growing and adding customers. Had a new customer sign up with me this morning, and it's a SaaS product. So everybody needs more than one backup, and not that they have to use me, but you need more than one. You have two kidneys, you have two legs, you have two braking systems in your car. Why would you have only one backup of your critical IT stuff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point before, it could be disastrous. It
Right.
could shut you down. Well, Chris, we've got so much more to talk about, and I cannot wait to dig into more, but we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Chris Marshall on the Something Extra podcast.
In business, the tendency is to seek out partners who are bigger, faster, stronger. When it comes to IT, you should be looking for smarter, faster, better. That's just what you'll find with the talented technologists at Technology Partners. Our experts develop custom solutions to tackle your most complex challenges, all to simplify your processes in the smartest, most efficient way possible. The time to be swift and nimble starts now. Go to technologypartners.net/solutions and see what's possible.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with my friend Chris Marshall. So, Chris, I really want to reiterate this. So, really, you talk about, a lot of companies are doing this backup, they're not doing it daily. Really, you said what separates good from great when it comes to backups? And you said it's testing the data. And sometimes they'll do the backup, but they won't test the data. And I believe that is where verified backups really comes in, and you're doing it daily. I see, as I think about verified backups, I see as one of the biggest benefits, Chris, is peace of mind.
Right. And it's interesting. People don't know sometimes what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I do two things. One is I provide backup services, and two, I get on LinkedIn and I have a community and I talk about why this is important. If somebody listens to me and they go double or triple their backup resources and it saves them, then I've done them a great service, whether or not whether or not they're a customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate. Well, tell me this, there is a rise of cyber attacks. In fact, I heard a CIO one time say, it's not if you get attacked, it's when.
Right.
You know,
I heard 85% of companies have been attacked in the last year.
85%.
And the other ones just didn't notice or didn't fess up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. So, listeners, if you don't get anything else out of this podcast today, please, please, please make sure that you're backing up your critical systems and testing them. We'll put all of Chris's information in our show notes, and if he can help you, I know he would love to. So, Chris, technology is moving at a rapid pace. How do you personally stay on top of everything, and what is trending, what is coming? How do you stay on top of looking around the bend to see, the future of technology? What do you do personally?
So I do a lot of research on my own, and I do a lot of reading. And then I have a couple of really smart advisors that are in the field, in cybersecurity, in these areas, people you probably know, and we talk. And so I, appreciate when they can keep me up to date on something, but then, ultimately it's my responsibility to kind of see where things are headed anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, you started the podcast by saying when you were a little boy, you loved to read.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you still do. Do you have something that you're reading right now that would be of interest at all to our listeners?
So I really resisted reading Extreme Ownership, which is written by two Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And the reason I did is I don't know if all the cowboy stuff would apply to me, my business, the people I serve, and so on. I was incorrect. So these guys are Navy SEALs deployed in Iraq after 9/11, and a lot of firefights and a lot of leadership stories and things like that. But then, so they talk about the battle stuff, which I think is cool. But then they always talk about, like, okay, how does this principle affect business? How does this principle affect leadership? Um, One from yesterday, literally. So they have the book Extreme Ownership. They have their secondary book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, that every good tendency of a leader can be overdone, and you have to find a balance.
Mm.
So yesterday they were talking about how leaders have to be humble, but not passive. And to navigate that, we've all seen leaders who are very stuck on themselves, and they're miserable to be around. But humility doesn't mean that you don't push back when something's going to cause a problem, and raise somebody's awareness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's just one. But I enjoyed Extreme Ownership. I do Audible. They didn't have Audible when I was 6. I don't know why, but I'm just about like 10 minutes from done with their second book. Highly recommend.
I have that book. I have Extreme Ownership on my shelf, but I've not read it now. So now you just inspired me. I am going to read that. That sounds really amazing. I just had Patrick Lencioni on the podcast, Chris, and he wrote The Ideal Team Player. He's written lots of books, but The Ideal Team Player. And there are 3 things that make an ideal team player, and humility is one of the 3. So being humble is so important.
Yeah, and you can really lead people effectively, even on a large scale, without being a jerk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I could not agree more. Well, let me ask you this. You've been at this for a long time. Now, I'm not telling you that you're old, Chris, because we're not old. I'm not saying that, but you've been at this for a long time. So how do you personally stay motivated and passionate? Because sometimes when you've been at something for a long time, that passion can wane. But I don't see that with you. How do you personally stay motivated and passionate?
I look at the benefits. I told you the story of the kids and the orthodontist, but my wife and I talk about this all the time. Like the businesses I've created have really given us a nice lifestyle with some flexibility and some freedom. And we talk about that, and that really motivates you to do it another day because I see the good of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. You wrote something here, and I want to talk about this for a minute. You said when evaluation of a company is being conducted, there are 3 things at the top of the list. And I agree with all of these. I would add one more. It's EBITDA. Everybody wants to know, what is your EBITDA, right, when you're valuing the company? But number 1, you say it's a dedicated, talented workforce with visionary leadership, intellectual property and branding. Then the third one is defined processes, enterprise software, and protected data. And you said sometimes that protected data is the thing that companies don't think about or leaders don't think about.
Right. Because in a normal day, like if you're a CISO, the very best that can happen is that nothing happens that day.
It's a good day.
Right. So senior leaders can take that for granted, not meaning to, but well, I didn't have a heart attack yesterday and I'm feeling pretty good today and I don't think I'm going to have one tomorrow. So I'm going to focus on the 400 other challenges on my plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let's dig into this a little bit. I'd love for you to unpack these because some time ago you came up with 3 guiding principles. And when I look at these, I think they're so simple, yet they're profound. And I would love for you to unpack each of these if you can. But your first one is encouragement is the currency of greatness.
That could be attributed to Lisa Nichols. No, because and these are 3 things that's interesting. I didn't get them from Google. Two of them you won't find on Google now. One has showed up. But what's a simple way to remember what I need to do through my day? Encouragement is the currency of greatness. How I interact with everybody that I run into, if I do that with encouragement, that's what I believe makes great people and great leaders.
That's beautiful. I could not agree more. And sometimes I always say our words matter, Chris,
Right.
don't they? And so my prayer is always let my words be words of life and not
Mm-hmm.
words of death, because the power of the tongue, it weighs 3 ounces, Chris. It can,
Yeah.
it can hurt or it can encourage, right? So thank you for that. Number 2, discipline is the gateway to freedom.
And nobody likes the notion of discipline. I'm a big fan of Billy Joel, and he's just done his 100th sold out concert. And what nobody really thinks about with Billy Joel, and I first heard The Piano Man in 1976. I won't say how old I was then, but Billy Joel had to spend an awful lot of his early life doing scales. And he had to spend an awful lot doing chords. And he had to spend an awful lot like memorizing little pieces of music. And to be able to do what he does now, the freedom to do everything he does came from the discipline to do it. And that's really true for a lot of it. It's true for athletes.
Mm-hmm.
It's true for us in our lives. Like if we put the effort in today, that will give us freedom and comfort tomorrow.
That is so good. I love that. How about number 3? You never lose by being generous.
You don't, and it's so interesting because in our world, there's like hundreds of good causes, there's hundreds of great charities, and sometimes people get overwhelmed. I would say just pick one. And, like what are some things you can do to be generous? If you read a book you like, send it to a friend. Amazon makes that super easy. And if you see somebody on the side of the road and it looks like they need help with their tire and you can do that, like do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a resource such as the ones I've gotten from technology partners, like take really good care of them and pay them above average scale, and that won't ever come back on you in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I cannot agree more. And I love what you just said, because it's not just when people talk about generosity, Chris, it's not just money. We're not just talking money. It can be generous with your time. It can be generous with your skills, your talent. Somebody asks you to meet with a friend that needs some mentoring. I mean, that's giving up your time and maybe a little bit of wisdom, hopefully. Yeah, those are 3 wonderful guiding principles. You could probably write a book on those 3 principles, Chris.
It would be 18 words long, but
I somehow think it could be longer than that. Well, I've got to ask you this. I've got to know this. I've got to know the answer to this question, Chris, because you currently work about 18 hours a week. I want to know how you do this and still run a successful business. Clearly, you've got a lot of other priorities like family, and I know you're very charitable and working with charities. I'd love to know how you do it. How do you organize your time? Tell us the secret sauce.
thank you. Well, and this is in my programming business, so I run both companies still. And over the years, I've built up a great clientele, and I do something that's really a niche specialty, so I can charge more. And again, back to like the joys of being self-employed or solopreneur, whatever. I can handpick the clients, I can handpick the work, and I can handpick the bill rates. And because of that, I have more time to, take my wife to the doctor or take the kids somewhere or go out to California to my brother's ranch and, chase goats around or whatever. Um, Sometimes that's hard if you're a full-time employee because you don't dictate anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how do you organize your time? Do you like say you're working 2.5 days a week, or is it
Mhm.
4 hours every day? I mean, how are you doing that?
It's interesting because it seems to mostly just work out. So, like, if I looked at my billing software, which I also wrote for the last year, it's right at 18 hours a week. I've had a couple of like 20 to 25-hour weeks, and I've had some 10-hour weeks. But I look at the current clients I have, the current projects that are on my plate, and I schedule something with each of them every week to move things forward. And I just sort of I leave myself margins here and there.
Mhm. Yeah, that is awesome. I love that. What is that? The four, what is it? The 4 hour work week? Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to get it down to 4 hours, Chris.
Well, and that's the goal. And because Verified Backups is a SaaS product, as that expands, that's going to happen.
Yeah. Very good. Well, tell me about this because I know that with that 18 hours, you also make time to run half marathons. I don't know if have you ever ran a full marathon? But I think you've done like over 30 of these half marathons.
Yeah, thank you. Not all in a row. So I ran a full in 21. I ran my 39th half marathon on Saturday.
39th. Oh my word. What got you into this, Chris? What inspired you?
Um, it's interesting. I signed up for something called a Tough Mudder, and it's like this. I did it with a bunch of friends, and it's this kind of, you know, rough and tumble mud crawl pit thing. But it was like 11 miles long, and so I'm like, oh, I better be able to run 11 miles. So I went out and over a period of time, like starting at a quarter mile one day,
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
think that like they're going to start and they're going to go out and run 6 miles tomorrow, and you can hurt yourself. But I do my best thinking when I'm running. Like life seems more like the challenges in life seem more overcomable. I just made a
Mhm.
word
Mhm.
when I'm running, and so I really love that. And people tell me that they're too busy to go to the gym or go run or do whatever, and when you exercise, that's a gift to your family because you're going to be around some more days and you're going to be available to them some more days.
Mhm. Right. And sometimes do you think, Chris, like when you really master a discipline in one area, that oftentimes it spills over to other areas too?
Yeah, because big fan of Atomic Habits, and he talks a lot
Mhm.
about that. So our most recent one was cleaning the kitchen every night. So I like the kitchen clean. So I cleaned it for 150 days in a row and then I missed a day. So no big deal. You start over. But that was a habit that I found serving me in other areas.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. Um Well, tell me this. What have you learned? And I could put words in your mouth, but I don't want to do that. What have you learned through running these half marathons? Tell me about, the training and the fortitude and the resilience to keep pushing. Tell me about those things.
It is all of those. And the crazy thing, if you want to be a runner, you have to run. So actually had a running coach that I hired recently, and she has me running more days a week. Um, but that's a good thing. And people don't have to run; they can do yoga or Pilates or walk or go to the gym.
Hmm.
But yeah, that discipline, like I'm out 4 days a week running, and there's days I don't feel like going. There's never a day that I finish that I wish I hadn't.
Isn't that the truth? That
Yeah,
is that is the truth. And what I've talked to so many people about, it's just getting started
right.
with anything, right?
It,
Is the hardest thing.
that first, that first step is the hardest. So agree with a friend that you'll meet at the gym tomorrow at 6, and you'll wake up and you'll feel tired, but you're not going to let your friend down, and so you'll go to the gym. Like there's ways to hack all of that, and then once you start doing it, it just feels amazing.
It feels amazing. Yeah. Goodness gracious. It's been several years ago now, but our controller, Christy McNary, and we would get up and do a 6 a.m. boot camp at the Y. And we did that for a couple of years. And to your point, it's like some days it's like, oh, I don't really want to do it. But I didn't want to let her down. So
Right.
I would make myself. But yeah, find a friend. When do you run? Do you run in the mornings, Chris? Is that part of your morning routine?
It is. So the hotter it gets, the more I run. I had a great run this morning. And I just think you have to be smart. If it's 95, you're taking a lot bigger toll on your body, or the heat
Mm-hmm.
is. So, I mean, I was out this morning at 6:30 and it felt amazing.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, Chris, this is called Something Extra.
Mhm.
I have to ask you, what do you believe is the something extra that every leader needs?
So we sort of touched on it with humility, but I think every leader needs to be a follower. And there's two aspects to that. One is, are you following your leadership? But on the other side, if you have employees and direct reports yourself, are you following them? Because a lot of them are very smart and have great ideas. And if you come in and, I'm the big boss and I'm, impeccable, you're going to miss out on the people on your team. And so decisions have to be made and leading has to be done. But what can you do to learn from the people, if you will, that God has placed on your team? What can you do to learn from those people and in the process, teach them more about leadership?
Mm-hmm. That is amazing. I have never had anyone on the podcast, and we've done almost 300 of them, say that a leader needs to be a follower. But you could unpack that. There's a lot there because you're
Yeah,
following not only what you're saying as a leader, right? Are you drinking your own champagne, so to speak, following your people, learning from your people, and for me, it's following a higher power in my life. So yeah, that's really beautiful, Chris. Thank you
thanks.
so much for sharing that.
Yeah, if it's okay. This happens with our kids too. So my youngest is 27, my oldest is 39. So my 31-year-old came through town last night on her way on a trip, stayed with us for the night. And she was giving my wife and I like better ideas on how to meal prep and do all that stuff. And I'm like, if I sit here like I know it all, which I don't, I'm going to miss this blessing. And she had some great ideas, sent me some links. I mean, it was a phenomenal thing. And we're going to try it. And then we're going to call her and send her some pictures of it, because that's my way of following one of my kids and learning from that.
Oh, that's just beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much. Well, Chris, this has been so much fun. I knew it would be. I told you in the beginning, I knew that we were going to have fun. You're just an amazing human being, and we are blessed truly to partner with you all these years. So thank you, my friend, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. For show notes or to reach Lisa, visit tpi.co/podcast. Don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you listen.